Well, welcome to today's show. My guest was here a second ago. They evidently ran into a technical issue. Hopefully, they'll be joining us back in a minute. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully, David will be right back on the air. We'll be patient, give him a few minutes to resolve whatever the issue is. For those that are just joining, I typically every Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m. I have with me a guest that provides interesting content. And David's here, so we'll add David to the stream. Hey, David.
Hey, how you doing, Ken?
I am fine. How about yourself?
Hey, fantastic.
Yeah, I'm glad things worked out. We got you back.
Oh, it's just great to be here, and you're keeping up your good work.
So, and David is the author of a book, and I forgot the name. I forgot to put it in my notes. I'm sorry.
Well, there's one of them.
Trusted Leader. Very good. Yes. I knew we had talked about it, but I usually put it in my notes. I tend to forget.
Here's the other two that are Wall Street Journal bestsellers.
Yeah, Trust Edge and The Daily Edge. Very cool.
But the brand new one is that.
That one. Very good. And we're going to talk today with David about the importance of building trust in an organization and the 8 pillars of that create that trust that exists. It's the sad thing is that in many corporations, that's something that doesn't exist. There's not trust in a lot of different ways. So, David, you want to tell us a little bit about your background, how you got started?
Well, I basically was asked to do some leadership training way back a couple decades ago at one of the military academies. And I started seeing when I was doing some of that work, and I was young in my 20s at the time, the issues weren't what they thought they were. And so they thought, oh, it's a leadership issue. It's not. The only reason they follow the leader or not is trust. Oh, then we got a sales issue. We never do. At the core, the reason people buy or not was trust. It's an innovation issue. Well, we learned the only way to increase innovation on the team is increase trust, so people will share ideas and stop being scared. And how do we amplify a marketing message? There's only one way. We got to increase trust in the message. So we started seeing the root cause of the trust issue. In fact, this book this time, Trusted Leader, was written because most people are solving the wrong issue. They're calling it an engagement issue. We found the research. You only increased engagement when you increase trust. You only increase the net promoter score when you increase trust. You only increase, you only deal with the diversity and inclusion issues of our day when you increase trust. So basically back then, that led to my grad work, which became interesting before almost anybody was researching trust and leadership. Then, of course, the Trust Edge became Wall Street Journal bestseller. Then we used it in company. The first company we did a significant amount, and they said we saved $2 to $4 million in attrition costs in 9 months. So then we saw, this other company we did some work in, they said they gained 11% market share of a multi-billion-dollar organization. Then we had people say it tripled their sales. Then we had people say it saved their marriage. So we thought, well, we're maybe onto something. And along the way, it was changing me. So now, we put out one of the biggest studies on trust and leadership every year out of North America. It's a global study, Trust Outlook. And we have 3 big ways that we develop trust in leaders and organizations around the world, from pro sports teams to big companies to, global governments and corruption issues. So that's what we do.
Okay, well, very nice. And I think it's interesting what you said about trust impacting employee engagement and also retention, because I know that I left a job because they made changes that caused me to lose trust in the new leadership and their interest in, I don't want to say this, their interest in the people at my level in the company. I was like, it's time for me to go find a new home. And the interesting thing was I was right, because not long after that, there were some pretty dramatic impacts, for people in the field. They seemed like they kind of lost focus on the customer. They lost, and they sure didn't care about the people that they were letting go out the door.
Yeah.
And like I said, I just saw the handwriting on the wall. I said, it's time for me to get out of Dodge while I still can.
Mm-hmm. It's always true. I mean, so my argument today would be, from the research and from work on 6 continents, and of course we have Trust Edge certified coaches on 6 continents, would be a lack of trust is the biggest cost of every organization. It is always a trust issue at the core. The attrition, retention, innovation, stress. It's always a trust issue at the core, and it affects the bottom line. And you can take it simple without all the research. Actually, you can say, "What do you mean trust costs money? Isn't it just a soft skill?" Well, think about this. A good example of a lack of trust would be a lock. The only reason I put a lock on anything is because I don't trust you. So then what's the cost? Well, I got to buy the lock. That's money. And then I got to open it every time I go through the gate. That's time. There's always a cost where there's a lack of trust. I text someone you trust. How long does it take? Bloop, done. Now try to text someone you don't trust. How long does that take? Oh, how are they going to take this? How are they going to take that? Forevermore. It's always a cost where you have a lack of trust, and it's costing something. So a good question for organizations is, what's a lack of trust costing me? What's it costing us? Costing with that customer, with our team? There's always a gap. And when we can close the trust gap, we actually solve the biggest issue that affects the biggest metric of bottom line of sales, of cost, of attrition, retention, whatever it is. So, you think about it simply, we buy more from the trusted brand, we pay more, we'll, follow a trusted leader, we'll buy from some salesperson we trust. So, that's that first side. And of course, then that begs the question of how do you build trust? And that's the big work of this 8-pillar framework of how you build trust individually and globally.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about, and I want to speak just actually 1 second before I ask the question. It's interesting because one of the things that I talk about in the service management course I teach is the need for people that are going to be leading a team to build that trust in them and to become, I like the term servant leadership. In that, I think that is such a great term, and associated. Now the thought just went right out of my head. I was going to say, the whole piece of it is to be interested in your people, be interested in their success, and that builds the trust. And I didn't think about it necessarily in terms of building trust. And associated with that was I interviewed somebody a couple episodes back that talked about the company story. You get people to buy into the story. Well, people aren't going to buy into a story if they don't trust what's behind it.
The story doesn't matter. The leadership doesn't matter. The culture doesn't matter if there isn't trust. The root cause is a trust issue. Then, I said it before, the only reason you follow a leader or not has something to do with trust. The only, a culture built on trust is where people perform at their best. And, it's all these things that you say are true. Servant leadership is a great word, by the way, for part of what we talk about with trust. But when we talk about how we build trust, servant leadership talks a lot about caring and about character. However, it's not everything as far as trust, because I might trust you, Ken, to take my kids to the ball game because of your, compassion, your character. That doesn't mean I will trust you to give me a root canal because of, competency at that specifically. So there was these 8 components, and we use them, like I said, with everything from global governments to pro sports teams to companies around the world. And turns out to gain this thing we call the trust edge, or to really be a trusted leader, we have to think about all 8.
Okay. So let me ask this question then. How is it that you can kickstart a genuine trust building effort in an organization? So how do we get this process started? How is it we can really start to transform our company into something that is based on trust?
Well, first, you got to get buy-in. They have to see the impact of trust is not a soft skill. It actually affects them and the bottom line. Remember, organizations don't change, individuals change. But when an individual changes, then a company, even a country can change, right? So they have to start with seeing the bottom line impact, or the kind of the case for trust, how it affects time, how it affects them. Secondly, you got to have a common language, and for us, that's the 8-pillar framework. We haven't talked about it much yet, but we'll get to them. But the 8 pillars of trust, you have to have this language because you can solve every organizational leadership issue against these 8. Doesn't mean I'm perfect at it. I'm not perfect at anything I'm going to talk about today. I just know it's true from the research. If you can have a language that's solving the real issue instead of calling it a leadership or communication issue. By the way, I'll tease it out here that you never have a communication issue at the core, and I'll tell you what I mean in a few minutes. But you have that common language. If you can develop that in a team or an organization that's solving the right issue, that of course is a next step. And the next step is using tools, not staying up in, where I was a professor up in theory and research forever, but you bringing that research to something I can act on tomorrow morning, tools that I can use to build each of these pillars. Then I have a chance at kickstarting. And of course, the final step is of all, looking at all those 8 pillars, looking at the tools that we offer and saying, okay, what one thing should I start on right now? What should I use? What one focus should we have this week or tomorrow morning? Not everything. We all got plenty of issues, but what one biggest priority do we have that would make the biggest impact right now? That gives us a chance at doing something.
Okay. So let me ask you, let's talk. Tell me about the 8 pillars.
Okay, I'll go through them very quickly. This will be the longest portion of the show, but we need to know all 8. I know some people like, 3 points in a poem, but when it comes out of research, it's and you're talking about trust, to hide any of them really isn't fair. So for context, I'll give all 8, just reminding everyone that I can speak about each of these for a full day. They're all important. They have a whole lot to each of them, but let me just for context give you the 8-pillar framework. These were just revalidated last year by an outside university as the way trust is built globally. They're relatively comprehensive, so I'll tell you what I mean. They all start with the word C for clarity, but don't get confused into thinking, oh, that's because there's some motivational 8 C's. They're C's for clarity, but they all represent a research funnel. So here we go. Number 1, clarity. We trust the clear, and we mistrust or distrust the ambiguous or the overly complex. So whenever I overcomplexify something beyond what is needed, I lose clarity, which loses trust, right? We trust the clear. Many people think they're clear when they're not. Even marketing and branding people, strategic people think, oh, they're clear. They're not. We lose clarity, we lose trust. Number 2 is compassion. We trust those that care beyond themselves. So, if you take anybody, like the most trusted person in the world to the most people is not, Oprah or the Pope. It's actually mom, because she has this innate ability to care beyond herself. That most people at least say their mom was the most trusted. Doesn't mean everybody has a perfect mom, but most people say they would trust their mom the most. And that compassion pillar matters. Don't underestimate the power of showing you care. Right. Number 3 is character. We trust those that do what's right over what's easy. And that character pillar is critical, but it's not everything. It's critical. We have a lot we could talk about under that pillar. I mean, many organizations think, oh, character's learned by 12 years old, right? There's nothing we can do about character when it's not true. Many organizations are incentivizing toward or away from character every day. Just like, in East Africa, if we don't stop incentivizing bribery, we're not going to get the character pillar that they want to actually have that would increase their GDP. Same with, we saw the Wells Fargo issue where they were incentivizing salespeople in a certain way, and it ultimately cost them billions. But every company is incentivizing toward or away from character by allowing maybe sarcasm or laughter at certain types of jokes or whatever. You're incentivizing character. Now, the next pillar is competency. So you might have to have character, but you have to have competency or capability in the area. I want to trust you. If I said it to you, might trust you, but not to give me a root canal, right? So you got to be fresh and relevant. For people listening, if they're selling the same way they were 20 years ago, I probably don't trust them. If they're leading the same way they were 10 years ago, I probably don't trust them. You've got to stay fresh and relevant and capable in this new economy every single day. Next pillar is commitment. We trust those that stay committed in the face of adversity. So if you take anybody in your life or in history, Mandela, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Jesus, or Joan of Arc, and they were trusted in many ways because they were committed to something beyond themselves, often to death, and they were trusted for that commitment. We trust those. This pillar, if we want to come back to it, would be where we'd find the idea of how you actually rebuild trust if you've ever lost it. The next pillar is connection. We trust those that are willing to connect and collaborate with others. So, if I look in organizations and I see counterforces to the pillars, each of them have counterforces. A counterforce to connection would be siloing or the unwillingness to share resources, right? So that would be some of the counterforces to that pillar. The next pillar is contribution, and the key word under this pillar would be results. We trust those that contribute results. Outcomes, performance. You can't just have compassion and character and not deliver the results I expected or asked for. I can't trust you. You might be a compassionate surgeon, but we go in for amputation and you cut off the wrong leg, we get a problem because I didn't get the result I wanted, right? So that one. And the final pillar is consistency. We're trusted for whatever you do consistently. If you're late all the time, I will in fact trust you to be late. I was working with a leadership team at McDonald's last week. Many people trust McDonald's. There's people that might not even like McDonald's, but they trust them because they, like me, have had the same burger on 6 continents, right? Consistency. The only way to build a reputation is consistency. Personally, the only way to build a brand as an organization is consistency. How we feel every time we go. So that's a glimpse overview of the 8 pillars of trust. And I believe, a couple more thoughts. I believe you can solve every organizational and leadership issue against these. You say, well, we got an engagement issue. You never do. The only way to increase engagement is one of these. The only way to increase net promoter is one of these. Same with communication. Oh, David, you like C words. Isn't it ever a communication issue? Ladies and gentlemen, at the core, it's never a communication issue. Communication is happening all the time. Clear communication is trusted. Unclear isn't. 2, compassionate communication is trusted. Hateful communication isn't. High character is, low character isn't, consistent is, inconsistent isn't. You can go down the list and use these. And then when you think of how to use them, you can see how they can be used to, affect change in your world. For the leader, they might need to be clear. If you take the clarity pillar, they might need to be clear about the vision. Maybe the manager needs to be clear about expectations. Maybe the salesperson is really clear about how cool they are and how long they've been in business, but no one's buying from them because they're not clear about the benefits of the product to me, right? Or the teacher, well, they're compassionate. Why do the kids hate the teacher? Turns out the teacher isn't clear about the assignments, so the kids go home frustrated. So you need to case it with that top pillar, and you can go through the pillars.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the salesperson for a minute, because you said it could be that they're not compassionate because they're not interested in what the client needs. They might have a product they're trying to sell, classic as a car salesman, they don't care what you want. They just want you to buy whatever they make the most money on.
Yeah.
And I love those 8 pillars. I think that there's so much insight in them. And you talked about consistency and mentioned McDonald's. One of the things I teach in my service management class is the need to develop procedures and training processes that deliver consistent results. The reason McDonald's is consistent is they have a consistent training process. Everybody gets plugged into the system, and when they come out, they know how to do their job right.
Jumping around. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, jumping around on fast food, as you know, politics aside, you look at the, let's say Taco Bell's about 460,000 annual revenue per store. You go up the food chain to Burger King, they're 1.5 million. You got 2 big ones. You got McDonald's and Panera at $2.5 million annual revenue, except for one that beats them badly. Annual per store revenue of a Chick-fil-A right now is about $4.4 million, and they don't even work on Sundays. Why are they winning? As the CEO says, it's not the chicken. All we sell is chicken. It's the way, the process. It's the same kids working at these other restaurants, but it's not the Chick-fil-A kids didn't just come out of the womb saying my pleasure. They got trained, they got equipped, and it's the same in other ways. I mean, wouldn't you love it if the Chick-fil-A folks got in charge of the DMV? I mean, we'd be through the line in no time. But they got a process. There's a reason they can get through that whole Chick-fil-A line because everything is systemized and consistent, not just, the process. So to your service point, I mean, consistent processes pay off, especially if they're consistently good.
Yes, exactly. And like I said, I love that. And I love the Chick-fil-A because I talk, that's one of the things, and I get into the customer service module, I talk about Chick-fil-A in saying please and thank you, and it's our pleasure. Those words are not expensive to say.
No.
They have huge impact if they're said with conviction, and you believe them, and a little compassion thrown in there. Yeah. And yet most businesses never do.
That idea came from, I just had Horsager on my podcast, Trusted Leader podcast show. And Horsager is the founder of Rich Carlton, one of them. And it was actually he that brought up the idea to Dan Cathy. They said, well, you got to find a way of doing this stuff consistently. And, what we do at Rich Carlton is say my pleasure. Now, you're not going to want to do that. You just want to find something that would work here. And Cathy's like, no, that works here. And so they copied the Ritz I think in saying, my pleasure, like they do in service to the rich. If your stuff is great and I love it. I think another one I love, for those of you interested in service, I love Horst Schultz's new book, Excellence Wins, and how he built the Ritz on service. So anyway.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, because a book that stuck with me I read many years ago was In Search of Excellence, and that may have been part of where the McDonald's came from. I'm a big reader of books, and especially when I started my company, I built it. And it's the interesting thing is when I sold my company, the one thing that all of my customers came to me and said, "Why did you sell? We loved doing business with you." But we built our company on a lot of the core fundamentals that you just mentioned as these 8 pillars. The fastest way to get fired in my company was lie to me or lie to a customer. That was a day one statement. You do either of those, we're done. You don't get a second chance. There's no way to come back from that. So for a company that's struggling with getting things turned around, where would you start? Where do you think that for most companies the starting point might be, or is it unique to each company?
Yeah, it can be. I do think. People need to understand the cost of trust, and then they understand this framework. And if they don't know where to start with clarity, because you can change results in 2 weeks with clarity, whereas commitment and character might take more time. So an easy one would be clarity. The other way to do it, we have measurement tools if anybody's interested in how you measure trust and close gaps. So we have 6 ways we measure trust in organizations, everything from a big enterprise trust index all the way down to a simple self-assessment. But as you know, back to Drucker, what gets measured gets managed. And so if you want to measure trust, then reach out and we can show. And that's we had a company not too long ago do an enterprise trust index, and they say they saw a gap and saved $1 million in a day. So when you can actually see it for what it is instead of measuring the wrong things, dealing with the wrong things, that helps. Number one. Another idea would be take a look at the pillars, and once you have more context, if you've read Trusted Leader or Trust Edge or some of our work, and you see, well, that's what those pillars mean, you can think, well, what one are we doing well? You're doing some things well. Everybody's doing some of these things well. Underline those, and then pick one and say, if we did something about that pillar with some specific audience, if we built that pillar, not with everything, but like if we built clarity with our team, if we built compassion with that client, if we built whatever, pick an audience and say, how could I build that pillar, in the next 90 days with that audience? That, whatever one many people will know in their gut, oh, we need to show more commitment to them. That would change our sales or whatever,
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I think that, and I use the analogy that a lot of times what you do is, if you're going to start fixing things, is you get your low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
So where are my biggest gaps that are causing me the most pain, causing my audience, whether it's internal, external audience, the most pain? And if we can fix those fairly easily, let's do that first.
Yeah.
And then we can start to work on the things that are a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You started to say something.
No, I agree with you completely. We have a little bit of a process that helps too, and we call it how. So I will argue the number one question, the top 3 questions that actually take an idea to an action are not the why and not the who. The number one question that actually takes an idea to an action is actually how, because the how gives hope. So we ask how until we can act on it today or tomorrow. Most people stay up here. I'll say, well, what do you need? Well, we want to have a better culture. Okay, how are you going to have a better culture? Oh, we're going to be nice. Okay, how are you going to be nice? We're going to be more clear. How are you going to be more clear? We're going to communicate more. I don't trust them yet. How are we going to communicate more? We're going to hold people accountable. Until we ask how, all the way down until we can act on it today or tomorrow, I don't trust them. How, until you can act on it today or tomorrow. When I lost the 52 pounds in 5 months in 2011, I asked people, well, how do you stay fit on the road? Like, I'm on the road all the time. And they said the same thing: eat less, exercise more. That was not clear enough for me. So, well, but how do you eat less on the road? How do you exercise? How? Until I got some ideas I could do. And remember, you got to do things you can do, not, if someone said to me, I can never have ice cream again, it's just not going to happen. But I had to figure out how until I could apply it. And I got to some hows that I would do. And that's what I would do with these. Pick a pillar and say, how, until you will do something. How are you going to be more compassionate? Well, I'm going to appreciate people more. How am I going to appreciate people more? Until you tell me you're going to write a note every day for the next 90 days at 10 a.m., I don't trust you.
Yeah, I love that, because again, if you don't know how you're going to do something, why would I believe you are going to do it?
Right, exactly. Yep. And
Yeah,
they
so
all tie together.
Yeah, so there goes my confidence and maybe your competence, and several of those C's could be in question there.
Right.
So for the audience, we're going to put a link to your book in the show notes, either on the podcast or on the YouTube channel or in LinkedIn. There'll be a link to your book available for them, so if they're interested in that. And is there some way, if they wanted to work with you, that they should reach out? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Probably the best way is just go to trustedge.com, trustedge.com, or you can email us at david@trustedge.com. My assistant will probably get that, but david@trustedge.com. Just check out trustedge.com. As far as the book, we have some special takeaways right now because of the publisher and everything, that you can go to trustedleaderbook.com and you can get some extra special takeaways and so forth. And we give you a self-assessment. We give a diagnostic. We give some videos you can start going deeper on right away. Just complimentary, like I don't know, about $1,000 worth of training development for free, just for buying the book for $20 or whatever it is. So just know that you can do that if you go to trustedleader.com. That's the best way forward there. Okay. Well, actually, that's the link we'll put in all the notes then, is trustedleaderbook.com. Yeah. Trustedleaderbook.com. Okay. And we'll put them in the show notes. I can type it better than I can say it. Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay. So if you'll hang around for just a minute, we'll say goodbye to the folks. Thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this on the replay, do me a favor, leave any comments or any questions. It doesn't matter where you leave them, we'll find them, and we'll get back to you with some information to help answer your question. I do think that this is something that most organizations can benefit from. I would encourage you to look at and reflect on the concept of building and increasing the trust. Because the company that I worked for and left wasn't that the company wasn't a trusted brand. It was. But internally, my trust in the company eroded because of decisions. And it could have been that had they communicated more clearly the impact it would have, or had they shown more compassion, more clarity. There's a lot of things in those C's that they could have done that might have retained me as an employee. But because they didn't do it, they lost out. So I would encourage you to think about that. Maybe it's something that will benefit your company. And we'll see everybody next week, same time, same channel, 2 o'clock, LinkedIn, YouTube, and the podcast will be up later. Goodbye. Thanks, Ken.